Sniper rifles, scorpions, scarabs, oh my, what a fantastic experience Halo 3's 7th mission, the Ark, is. Utilising so much of the series' incredible sandbox within a series of wildly varied encounters, it is one of the best parts of Halo 3's campaign, rivaled only by later mission The Covenant in terms of sheer quality. And for that reason, I think it's worth us having a good old chinwag about it. The Ark also does take place a good way through the game's campaign, so let's first quickly remind ourselves of what happened previously during Halo 3. After quite literally coming down to Earth with a bump, Master Chief is found by Sergeant Johnson, the Arbiter, and a group of Marines, and together they begin their journey towards an extraction point. Along the way, Johnson is captured by the Covenant, but is rescued soon after, before the entire squad is eventually extracted to a human base known as the Crow's Nest. Miranda Keyes and Fleet Admiral Hood then lay out their plan to prevent the Covenant from activating a Forerunner artifact located in New Mombasa, an artifact they believe could be used to fire the Halo array, leading to the destruction of all life in the galaxy. There's little time to talk things through, however, as the base is promptly attacked, with Master Chief activating a bomb designed to destroy the facility before escaping via the Tsavo Highway and heading towards the city of Voi. Battling his way through a small army of Covenant, including a fearsome Scarab, Chief manages to take down the enemy's anti-air defences, which gives Admiral Hood the opening he needs to launch a counterattack on the Covenant ships surrounding the artifact. But just as it looks like the tide may be turning, the Prophet of Truth manages to activate the artifact before escaping using the enormous slipspace portal it creates, at which point things quickly go from bad to worse, as the flood-controlled Covenant ship, the Indulgence of Conviction, appears in the sky on a collision course with Earth. With the help of the elites, Master Chief fights his way past the flood to the crashed ship, where he finds 343 Guilty Spark and a message from Cortana which warns that the flood soon plan to attack the Earth in full force. Cortana also says in her message that she believes the key to defeating the flood without firing the Halo array lies on the other side of the portal, and so Chief, joined by Keyes, the elites, and 343 Guilty Spark, head through the portal and arrive at the Ark. The Ark begins with this iconic line:
"Brute ships, staggered line. Shipmaster, they outnumber us 3-1.
Then it is an even fight."
And in general, this cutscene is pretty marvellous, and something of a rarity up until this point. In terms of cinematics, I generally think Halo 3's first half is one of the weakest parts of the trilogy, other than the ending of the storm, which is also rather engaging. So these action-packed scenes really help the mission start out strong, especially when compared to most of the others in the first half of the game, which often feature a lot of dialogue, but very little action. Soon after taking control of Master Chief, a Marine mentions the sky.
Check it out, in the sky. Is that...
Hey, focus. We got a job to do.
The skyboxes in Halo 3 are usually brilliant, with a ton of stuff to look at, but even with that being the case, I'm glad this line was included, as I'm the kind of person who most likely would have otherwise failed to notice the Milky Way in the sky above. The next section is a nice idea in principle, but for me, it's also a bit hit and miss. Sneaking up a nearby ridge alongside a group of ODSTs, this area would have no doubt reminded many of you of a similar situation in Truth and Reconciliation. If you recall, in Halo Combat Evolved's third mission, you sneak up a ridge towards the Covenant in a desert area and begin taking them out from a distance using a sniper rifle. You're given a decent amount of room to maneuver, and the environment is spacious enough that you can clear most, if not every single enemy undetected. And for me at least, even though it's a fairly short sequence, I've always found it to be one of the most memorable. My issue with the Ark's variation on the theme is that the area the Covenant patrol doesn't feel quite as well designed for this similar encounter. It's easier to get spotted, and because there are so many enemies squeezed into a tighter space, events often quickly devolve into a straight-up firefight. What Bungie usually does so well throughout the Halo series is set up environments and encounters to play to the strengths of the loadout or vehicle you'll most likely be equipped with at the time. For example, in Truth and Reconciliation, you're equipped with a sniper rifle, and so Bungie gives you plenty of space to remain undetected while you stealthily take out the enemy, and likewise when you get your hands on a Scorpion later on in the Ark, Bungie throws a lot of Covenant vehicles into the mix, giving you plenty of nice big targets to blow up. By comparison, the encounters during this first section of the Ark are entertaining, and they're a nice nod to Truth and Reconciliation, but overall, I don't think they're quite as well designed as they perhaps could have been. That being said, I do like that 2 hunters are thrown in at the end, as they can be quite tricky customers when you fight them on foot, and they serve as a nice point of comparison ahead of your only other meeting with them later in the mission, when you're able to take them down with ease thanks to your increased firepower. Moving forward, you're given a hint towards what will transpire later in the level.
Chief, I'm giving the brute all I've got. But this is a heavyweight fight. Dawn's only got the tonnage to last a few rounds. Find me a place to set her down, over.
Immediately after which, you can find the first of 3 terminals hidden throughout the level which tell the story of Forerunners the Didact and his wife the Librarian. They tell the story of the Didact attempting to convince the Librarian to let him rescue her as the Forerunners' war against the Flood rages on, with the Librarian preferring to continue her work cataloguing various species as a failsafe in the event the Halo array has to be activated to stop the Flood. They're really rich in terms of lore and weave a fascinating tale, although it is worth noting that looking at them in retrospect, the story they tell has changed following the expansion of Halo's lore, with it now seemingly likely that the Librarian was actually talking to a separate version, so to speak, of the Didact, known as the Iso-Didact, rather than the Didact himself. Something I always really liked about the Forerunners in the original Halo trilogy was the air of mystique around them, and that has definitely eroded over time as more games have released and it's been necessary for the series' lore to expand. But I think on the whole these terminals strike a good balance between giving you more information on what went on many years ago, while still maintaining a sense of mystery that arguably isn't really there in the present. The next section is where the arc really begins to lean into the Halo sandbox, and it does it extremely well. Mongooses, choppers, ghosts and many other vehicles are all involved in the ensuing battle, and while in design terms there's nothing going on here that you won't have seen in Halo previously, it's a very entertaining segment. I know I say it in nearly every video I create covering Halo, but it's also always worth highlighting how utterly brilliant the soundtrack is during each mission. No Time for Sightseeing is a more low-key track which matches the opening sniper segment well. Perilous Journey and Behold a Pale Horse help the mission feel further connected to Halo Combat Evolved, and Edge Closer's fast-paced, unusual sound pairs perfectly with the final battle against the brutes within the Forerunner structure. And speaking of connections to Combat Evolved, much like the sniper section at the beginning of the level and the music I just mentioned, there's also another nod to a classic Halo mission here, or at least I think there is, as you're given the choice of 2 separate paths. Like the arc's beginning mirrored Combat Evolved's Truth and Reconciliation, this part is reminiscent of the Silent Cartographer from the same game. In the Silent Cartographer, you're tasked with heading to a Forerunner structure before realising that you're locked out and need to turn off the security in order to head deeper within. You can, however, also go and turn off the security first, in which case Cortana's dialogue changes. Here's a snippet of what she says if you head to the locked door prior to visiting the security room.
Use the holo panel to shut down the security system.
And here's how it changes if you head straight to the security room without visiting the locked door first.
This isn't the map room. Analyzing. This is a security override station for the main facility, located somewhere else on this island. Shut the system down so the Covenant won't be able to lock us out.
The arc does similar, at least to a certain extent. If you take the first path, which leads to a deserted bridge in a Forerunner structure you can't yet access, Johnson will arrive in a Pelican to lead you to the landing zone you need to clear in order for the ship the Forward Unto Dawn to drop off its cargo.
Ma'am, Focus almost got a wing shot off. But we spotted a structure on the other side of this wall. It matches Cortana's description of the map room on the first Halo ring.
A cartographer. Good. Should help us fix Truth's location. Secure the LZ, then we'll push through that wall.
Roger that. Follow my Pelican, Chief. LZ's this way.
Whereas if you head to the landing zone straight away, disappointingly, Johnson's dialogue does not change one bit, which is kind of a shame.
Commander, bring her down.
Roger that. Beginning my descent.
I think given the sheer number of sections in 3 which seemingly mirror other parts of Halo games, and especially Combat Evolved, you have to assume that this was again intentional, and that notion of riffing off the old classics is all but confirmed during later missions, with the Covenant featuring an opening beach assault much like the Silent Cartographers, and Halo concluding things with a Warthog escape sequence which is very similar to the one included during Combat Evolved's final mission, The Maw. The arrival of the Forward Unto Dawn itself is one of my favourite scenes in the entire trilogy. The music swells, the enormous ship sweeps into view, and any wreckage in the surrounding area is blown backwards by the strength of its thrusters. You're not really given that many opportunities during the original trilogy to witness the scale of the larger human ships, and I think the Dawn's entrance, combined with the speed at which it arrives, and its ability to drop off a significant number of vehicles, does a rather good job of that. The next sequence is your bread and butter tank in a Halo game section, and I have heard it described in the past as the Ark's assault on the control room moment. For those of you who don't remember, that mission in Halo Combat Evolved also features a tank section which takes you through several very open areas. Personally, I'm not sure I'd agree with that assessment though, as I think the tank section in later Mission The Covenant is far more reminiscent of it as you drive a Scorpion through the icy tundra. But whether it's a deliberate reference or not, one thing's for certain, it is a lot of fun. Something I found lacking in Halo 2 at times were the huge open encounters that I think Combat Evolved did so well. Halo 2, other than the occasional mission like Quarantine Zone, often felt like a narrower affair, but Halo 3 is bang on the money in this regard. The journey back to the wall you need to push through to access the cartographer isn't an overly long one, and you are retracing your steps through an area repopulated by new enemies, but it's hard not to get excited by the sheer scale of events. There's plenty of Covenant vehicles to take on, you're backed up by a lot of Marines, and you even get to flex your muscles by taking down a pair of Hunters much more easily than those you encountered towards the start of the arc. There's also this dialogue from one of the Marines, which is pretty great.
Tank beats ghost. Tank beats Hunter.
Phantom inbound!
Look out for the turret!
Tank beats everything. Oh man, I can do this all day.
Once you've taken down the last of the Covenant reinforcements on the previously unoccupied bridge, 343 Guilty Spark unlocks the door leading inside, and you activate a light bridge so your reinforcements can continue forwards. What I find interesting here is that the vehicles crossing the bridge seem to rely on the AI driving them rather than being entirely scripted, which can lead to them getting in a bit of a muddle, and on the odd occasion even making quite fatal mistakes. Those poor blighters never stood a chance. Making your way outside, now on the other side of the wall, a Scarab passes above you and a Marine driving a Warthog equipped with a cannon arrives to ferry you to your destination. When the AI drives the Warthog correctly, it's exhilarating, but they are prone to getting confused, which can be a little frustrating and definitely slows down the action every now and then. It's something Bungie never really managed to solve, and although it's not a huge gripe, I think it's worth mentioning nonetheless, as sometimes it seems to happen when there really shouldn't be any issue. On the other hand, it's not something I end up worrying about for too long during this section, as I nearly always hop in the driver's seat of one of the nearby Scorpions upon reaching the next open area. Fortunately, Bungie gives you a bit of space between yourself and the nearby Wraiths, which is a sensible decision given the Scorpion's relatively lackluster turning speed, but while this encounter is a good one, taking the Scorpion into the Scarab battle which follows can make it somewhat trivial compared to that featured during earlier mission The Storm. That being said, when thinking about the wider Halo 3 campaign, I suppose it does sort of work. During The Storm, taking down a single Scarab was a tricky affair, whereas taking down one in the Ark is much easier, making them feel like far less of a threat overall. Then, during the Covenant, Bungie pulls the rug out from under you once again by introducing two on a single battlefield, which ramps up their threat level, keeps you on your toes, and ensures the scene has a particularly large impact. Heading towards the cartographer, Guilty Spark nips at one of the Marines.
Hey, what gives?
It seems I've crossed a circuit.
Well, let me have a look.
Oracle!
Little bastard stung me.
I did not want you to come to any harm.
Got a funny way of showing it.
Before you take on an extremely easy stealth section, which includes a brute doing his business in the corner, as well as a few more Covenant squads. Even this feels like it could possibly be an homage to Combat Evolved, as much like the library on Installation 04, you once again find yourself exploring a Forerunner facility accompanied by Guilty Spark himself. I'm a big fan of how the Forerunner structures in general are handled in Halo 3. Combat Evolves were generally very repetitive, and often reused environments multiple times across a mission, mission. Halo 2 features far less repetition, but there are a lot of long stretches spent inside them which I generally found to be less interesting than other parts of the game, and Halo 3 in my view pretty much nails it. You often don't spend that long a time actually inside the Forerunner structures, and even when you do, for example here towards the end of the arc, it's usually easy to navigate from point A to point B, with the level design also remaining varied enough throughout that you rarely feel like you're constantly passing through the same rooms over and over again. Reaching the cartographer, Truth's location is then revealed.
Can you tell me where we are exactly?
Here,
And Truth?
near one of the Ark's supraluminal communication arrays, I'm afraid. Unfortunate. The meddler has triggered a barrier, a defensive perimeter around the Ark's core.
At which point it's time to begin heading for evac while the Arbiter takes to the skies. The next few areas are again quite standard firefights, although you will run across this brute.
The pack will feast on you!
Who you can then see again if you head back to the room housing the cartographer, a scene which is rather easy to miss. And not long after, you'll meet him face to face in an encounter that includes something of a twist in that if you only attack the chieftain in the middle, the other brutes will stand by and watch until he's been dispatched. I really like this as a one-off idea. It rewards those who spend a little extra time evaluating the situation they find themselves in with an easier encounter, rather than those who immediately start shooting as soon as they catch sight of a single brute. And once the chieftain and the rest of his gang have been laid to rest, the arc concludes. All in all, I think it's fair to say that the arc is one of the best missions in the entire trilogy. While I don't think it's necessarily one that includes a ton of subtle but clever design choices, what it does offer is almost all of Halo's fantastic sandbox wrapped up in an open and entertaining affair rivaled only by Mission the Covenant in terms of the best Halo 3 has to offer. It may also be one of the longest missions in the series, but unlike previous examples of similar levels like Assault on the Control Room, it is excellently paced throughout, it improves on many of the flaws in previous titles, and it does it all without ever feeling like it's outstayed its welcome. Thanks for watching the video, boys, girls and Spartans. If you had a good time, or even if you didn't, do consider liking, subscribing and letting me know your thoughts, and hopefully we'll meet again soon.